My name is Al McCauley. I grew up in this parish, received all my sacraments of initiation here, graduated from the school over there. How long have we been here? Oh, I'm 50, 1968, so I'm not good at math, so it's more than 10 years. I'm the director of adult faith formation at St. Anthony on the Lake Parish, but I served as a high school theology and history teacher for 24 years at Pius XI Catholic High School. And I taught, among other things, a lot of theology. I taught a lot of history classes. I taught in 2 departments. And I taught art history for a number of years. And so what I want to do today is talk to you about St. Joseph through the lens of art, believe it or not. Everybody have a brochure, a little pamphlet, a little thing? Everybody good? All right. So that's what I want to talk about, is the heart of St. Joseph through art, if you will. Anybody here know or love somebody named Joseph? Middle name, confirmation name, first name? Raise your hand, proud. There you go. My dad was one of 3 boys in his family named Joseph. They were all named Joseph. And they went by their middle names. So that was a very important name to my grandparents, obviously. Joseph being the stepfather of Jesus, the spouse of Mary, very important person. Do you know what today is? May 1st. Today is what? The feast of St. Joseph the Worker. Joseph is one of those guys who doesn't get just 1 but 2 feast days in the church's calendar. There are very few saints who have more than 1 feast day. Mary's got more than anybody. She's a saint. Joseph's got 2, John the Baptist has 2, Peter and Paul. So he's in rarefied air. He's important. Anybody know when his feast day is? Today is Joseph the Worker, May 1st. When's his other feast day? Kim knows. March 19th. Very good. March 19th. So if you know or love somebody named Joseph, you can talk to them. You can wow them with all the information you're going to learn today about Joseph. I think there are a lot of lessons we get from the man, but the 3 I want to talk about today is that he's a man of silence, he's a man of trust, and he's a man of example, okay? This is very important to remember that this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot that we can get from this guy, but these are the 3 real big takeaways. He's a man of silence, a man of trust, and a man of example. And I want to talk about the first one, silence. Doesn't mean he never talked, but he was somebody who listened in silence to God. Now, we know very little about Joseph. He's not mentioned in most of the Gospels. In fact, Jesus is only born in 2 of the Gospels, Matthew and Luke. We only hear about the infancy narrative of Jesus. So by extension, Joseph isn't talked about a lot. What we know about him largely comes from Matthew's Gospel. And you might not know this, but he does not say a word in Matthew's Gospel. There's no words, spoken words of Joseph's recorded in the Gospels. Everything we know about him is told to us by the narrator, who says, Joseph did this, Joseph went there, Joseph reacted this way. So what we know is he was a man of silence. It doesn't mean he didn't talk, but it does mean that he was silent enough to open himself to God's word. Would you agree that we are not very silent these days? How many of you drive, be honest, how many of you drive someplace and you have to have the radio on? Or a podcast or something? Yeah, hands down. How about at home, TV, background noise? Anybody here go to sleep with white noise? Yeah. And now that's not a judgment. I do a lot of those things. I'm not saying they're bad in and of themselves, but we are surrounded by noise. And quite frankly, there are some things in our Catholic faith that can't be explained by words. The Eucharist. You can explain it, but it's really hard to understand. Sometimes you just have to revel in the mystery. The psalmist said it best. Psalm 46 says, "Be still and know that I am God." And that's what Joseph did. He was still and knew that he was with God. All right, this is my first piece of art. It comes from the Northern Renaissance, a guy named Pieter Bruegel. He's a Flemish painter, arguably the greatest Flemish painter of his age. And this piece of art is called Census at Bethlehem. So if you're sitting in the back, can you see it okay? Okay. Census at Bethlehem. So census at Bethlehem is what happens. What's going to happen if we know it's a census of Bethlehem? What event in the scriptures is going to occur soon? Jesus' birth, right? Joseph and Mary go from Nazareth in the north of Israel down to the south where Bethlehem is. You could take Israel out of the Middle East and put it in our state. The northern part would be about Green Bay, the southern part to about the Illinois-Wisconsin border, from Lake Michigan east to west to Madison. So they're walking from roughly Sheboygan to Kenosha. okay? And they're going to be counted. And Pieter Bruegel paints this in a scene that would have been reminiscent of his own time in the 16th century. This is clearly not Bethlehem. There's no snow in Bethlehem like this. But what you see is a lot of people going about their business, working, kids playing. You see all kinds of things going on. They're on with their daily lives. Can you see from your seat where Mary and Joseph are in this painting? Right there. You know, it's interesting, just as an aside, how many times do we go about our daily lives, working, rushing, waiting in line, kids playing, on our way across a frozen pond to work, whatever we're doing, meeting with neighbors. How many times do we do that and we don't even recognize that Christ is in our midst? You know? It's an interesting thing. I'm going to blow this up for you because I want you to see it really well. There's a lot of teaching that you can do with art. This is what I love about it. You have to understand that, especially from the Renaissance on, so 1400, 1300 on, artists had a great responsibility. And the responsibility was to teach through their art because cameras weren't invented until the middle of the 19th century. So they painted, they had a great responsibility. They had to make sure that what they're putting on there was consistent with what the church said. It's really important to understand that. So you see Mary here. What animal is she on? She's on a donkey. Now, a donkey has a lot of different symbolism. It represents the Gentile people. Do you know what Gentiles are? Anybody who's not Jewish. So the donkeys represent Gentiles, but it's also a symbolic animal of peace. A horse is a symbol of war. If you see famous people like Napoleon, he's on horseback because he was known as a general, right? Mary's riding a donkey, a symbol of peace. Christ comes into this world in peace. How is he triumphantly entering into Jerusalem? We just celebrated this a few weeks ago on Palm Sunday. What is he riding? A donkey, not on a horse. He's not that military leader they were hoping for. He's a man coming in peace to bring a peaceable kingdom. What's the animal behind it? It's an ox, a symbol of sacrifice, a symbol of the Jewish people. So who is Jesus coming for? He's coming for the Jews to be their Savior, but also for the Gentiles, for all of us. He represents the whole universality. Jesus is for all times and all places and all people. Can you see Joseph there? How do you know that's Joseph? Just by looking at him. Can you see where Joseph is right here? How would you know that's Joseph just by looking at him? What symbols? What's he holding? Can you see? He's holding, I'm going to see if my laser pointer works, but not on the screen. He's holding a saw. Do you see that? And a basket full of tools. Imagine walking from Sheboygan to Kenosha with a basket full of tools. I don't know why he would do that. I don't think he would. I think that Pieter Bruegel painted that in so we would know darn well that that's Joseph. Can you see what face he's making? No. You know why? Because he's a man of silence. He says nothing in the scriptures. So artists sometimes will paint him where you don't see his face, because they want you and I to remember that he was a man of very few words, but he was a man of action. What's he doing? He's leading Mary to a place where hopefully she can give birth, and he's pointing the way. And what's he pointing the way to? He's pointing the way to that building over there. That's the inn where there was no room. Does it look crowded? Look at the top left. Here, look at the top left. There's a guy up in the loft already. How do we know this is the inn? Because of those two symbols. The wreath is a universal symbol of welcome, and the pitcher is a symbol of hospitality. And so this is a place where Joseph is hoping to find lodging. He doesn't. We know this, right? No room at the inn. You know the story, correct? So it kind of begs the question, where then is Pieter Bruegel going to paint in the place where Jesus is going to be born, do you think? It's right there. And how do we know that? He gave us a clue. He put a little cross up there so we would know it foreshadows where Jesus would be born. Notice the picture on the side outside of the shack there. They would be welcome there. They would find hospitality there. Jesus would be hospitality himself. Here's another one, Giotto. Love Giotto. Has anybody here been to the Louvre in France? Anybody? So if you go to the Louvre, everybody wants to go see what painting at the Louvre? Mona Lisa. It's smaller than that screen, I think, but it's a huge room almost unto itself. There's artwork in that, but it's so many people are in there, and you know what they're all doing? They're all doing this. If that's the Mona Lisa, they're doing this. They're taking selfies. How do I know that? Because I've done that myself. It's just true. It's true. But you know what's really sad is there are dozens and dozens of people in this huge room to see the Mona Lisa, and right outside the door are some priceless Giottos. And it's like, oh my gosh, they're gorgeous. And people just walk right past them because they saw the Mona Lisa. Then they want to go see the second most famous piece of art there, which is the Venus de Milo. It's the statue with, it's very disarming to look at. That's okay. Hey, I'll be here all afternoon. No. So this is the nativity, and I love this. Again, these artists have a responsibility to teach something about our faith. So I put the little square around Joseph. What's Joseph doing? He's sacked out. He's asleep. Why? Because it's really tiring to watch your wife give birth. Husbands, am I right? Gentlemen? None of the guys are agreeing with me because they're like, I'm sitting next to my wife, man. I don't want to get... Smack me upside the head. It's absolutely true. It's exhausting. My wife and I have 3 children. I was exhausted after each one was born. Don't you feel bad for me? Why is he asleep? Not because he's uncaring, but because when does God speak to Joseph? In dreams, when he's asleep. So Giotto, like many artists, want to paint him asleep, not because he's a lazy bum, but because they want us to remember that this is how God speaks to him, through his dreams. And he's ready and willing to hear that. Now let's just talk a little bit theology. Go to the left of Joseph. Can you see the 2 animals? What are they? Donkey and ox. Who did Jesus come for? Everybody, Gentiles and Jews, right? Interesting to look at the animal that represents the Jews in this painting is the ox. Do you see what it's looking at? Or more importantly, what it's not looking at? It's not looking at Jesus. The Jews will reject Jesus as their Messiah by and large. The Gentiles will not. And so the donkey is fixed on Jesus. As an aside, are you familiar with Matthew 25, Matthew's gospel? It's the judgment of nations. When you've done this to least of my brothers and sisters, you've done it to me. You all know this. When I was thirsty, when I was hungry, you know that? Jesus says, at the judgment of nations, they'll be separated. The goats on the left and the sheep on the right. What animals do you see here? Sheep and goat. One goat. The only goat that's there is in the darkness. It's in the shadow. As Jesus looks at it, the goat is on his left. And it's looking away, as if to reject Jesus and his teachings. Now, you and I might say, well, that's pretty cool. People back in the 14th century when Giotto lived, by and large, were illiterate. They couldn't read books, and like you and I. They didn't have the neighborhood Barnes & Noble. They couldn't go to Amazon and buy a Bible. They didn't have those things. And so they had to read art, if you will, and be reaffirmed in their faith. But again, Joseph is silent. Because he's a man of silence, he's portrayed like he's asleep. St. Ambrose, 4th century bishop, I love this. The devil loves noise, Christ looks for silence. It's hard to hear the voice of God when we're talking all the time. Put it in a more modern sense. The Dalai Lama said this. When you talk, you're repeating what you already know, but if you listen, you may learn something new. Imagine our political discourse in this country if everybody listened instead of just talked. Imagine our political discourse in this country if we said, I am going to listen to you instead of formulate what I'm going to say in my mind as you speak. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think we do a lot of that. Imagine how, regardless of where you stand politically, imagine how different the language would be. Imagine how different the conversation would be if we could listen like Joseph. And so what I'd like you to do is this. At your tables, hopefully, you're sitting by someone you like. I just want you to talk for about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. I have 2 questions. You can pick or choose which one you want. Why is it difficult to remain silent? Or how difficult, I should say, is it to remain silent? And what are the main obstacles to practicing this discipline of being silent? Do you understand the questions? Can you take about 60 seconds, just have that conversation? And then I'll call you back. Go. All right, I'm going to call you back. Now, this is one of those times where I don't want you to be silent. I would love for you to give me insights about the second question. What are the obstacles? What kind of obstacles? There's a ton of them. What obstacles exist that prevent us from or make it difficult to just sit and be quiet. Anybody? What'd you talk about at your tables? Yeah, Amanda.
There's always stuff that has to be done.
There's always something that has to be done. Isn't that truth? Oh, yes.
All the technology, the phones, the TV, the radios, everything.
It's ever present, isn't it? Technology is ever present. I used to say when I was in high school, if I had a bad day in high school, I could go home and kind of unplug. You know, you kids don't have that because this follows you 24/7. You got it there. Unless you turn it off, you know, it's true. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes? Work. Yeah. That's true. Got to have that money thing. Yeah, you're right. Work is a distraction. It could be. Anybody else? Yes? Ego. Yeah.
People want to feel validated. They often feel like they want their ideas heard.
Yeah.
They think that they have the best ideas. And people, I think, look for that affirmation. And like you said, they'll be formulating what they're going to say to try to reestablish their position or their end.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Yeah, that's excellent. Ego has a lot to do with it. You're right. Yes? Stress. I'm too anxious to be stressed, so. But yeah, you're right. Stress, it's everywhere, and it's, you know, one way or the other, you know. Yeah, there's so many. I'll bet there's even more that you maybe talked about that you're not talking out loud about. But there's so many of these obstacles, and it's something to take to prayer. These questions, by the way, are in here, and so are others. If after this talk you're like, oh, you know what, he wasn't too much of a knucklehead, I won't mind looking at this a little further. There are some questions. Take them to prayer. Take, you know, time to consider, you know, quietly to contemplate. If you feel like feel motivated to be quiet in that, just some things to think about there to take forward. All right, so he was a man of silence. Do you remember what the second lesson was going to be? He was a man of trust. Very good. I wish I had a prize to give you. I don't have one. He was a man of trust. If you could, I would say it this way. If you could define Joseph in 4 words, it would be this. God spoke, Joseph acted. God spoke, Joseph acted. 4 words, and I think that defines the man in a lot of ways. You know, in order to do that, you have to be very humble. So I have a lot of different pieces of art here. There he is, sacked out again. Always tired. Can any of you relate to that? See, this is the thing. If you're someone who likes to take naps, just say, you know, listen, St. Joseph napped. He slept. Okay? So back off. I can sleep. Jesus slept, right? He was on the boat when the storm was going on. So sleep is important. Here's another one. Joseph sleeping. But in each of these particular pieces of art, notice who's talking. The angels, right? The angels are talking to Joseph. Think about this. There are 3 times angels appear to Joseph, and they say, hey, take this woman into your house. Don't worry, the baby is the Son of God. Hey, take the baby and the mom to Egypt and get the heck out of Dodge because you know what? Herod wants to kill him. And hey, get back into Israel now because Herod's dead, the threat's gone, you can go back home. And you know what he did every time? He listened. He did it. So if nothing else, take away this point about Joseph. He was in tune spiritually to God. He listened to God and he acted. He trusted. And I tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, teaching in a Catholic school, 30 years, and I could tell you, it's not always easy to trust. Would you agree? It's not always easy to trust in matters of faith. That's the difficult thing. Doubting is never a bad thing. I want to tell everybody here that. Doubting is never bad. It's what you do with the doubt. That's really important. It's okay to say, I don't know what I believe. Have those conversations with God. Take that to prayer. That's important. Joseph listened. I love this Gandolfi's painting, late 18th century. This is the full painting. Isn't that great? He's got his walking stick at hand and his shoes are already on, as if to say, if I dream it and God says I got to go, my marching orders are to go, I'm going to go. He's ready to hit the ground running. That preparedness, you know, that's ultimate trust. Going to bed, trusting that the next day you may be called to go somewhere. I love this one. This one's so real, isn't it? Anybody who's ever had a squawking kid at 2 a.m., is this Rembrandt? You've all heard of Rembrandt, right? I love this painting. There's Mary off to the right and with baby Jesus, and the angel is like, and doesn't Joseph just look totally forlorn there? He's like, oh my God, it's your turn to change the diaper. I just got up 10 minutes ago. How many can relate to this? It's so real. But Joseph, this is the second dream. This is the one where you got to get out of Dodge. And what's right by Joseph? The walking stick, ready to go. Ready to heed that call. Flight into Egypt. This is a very modern take on this. I just want to make sure I have time. So I have till 10 to about? Okay. Can I give you about a 3-minute or less Bible history? Can I do that? And you may know all of this, and it might just be refreshing, but repetition is the mother of all learning, so it's okay. All right, I'm going to do this. Old Testament, father of faith, his name is Abraham. Heard of him? Abraham had a son named Isaac. Isaac had a son named Jacob. Those are the 3 patriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You with me so far? Jacob has a bunch of kids, 19. Second youngest son is named Joseph. If you like Broadway shows, you know of him because he had an amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Are you familiar with this guy? Joseph was the beloved, spoiled kid of his father's old age, Jacob, right? And the older brothers hated him because he was spoiled. And he had a gift. This is Old Testament. This Joseph had a gift. Do you remember what his gift was? What did God give him the ability to do? Interpret dreams. And imagine I'm the youngest of 6. Anybody in here the youngest? Raise your hand if you're the youngest. So you can relate to this. Those of you who are the youngest, okay? Imagine you have a dream that says you are going to be better than your older siblings. Which is absolutely true anyway. But that never happened. And then, and those of you who are the youngest, would you have the guts to go up to your older siblings and say, you know what, I had a dream that says I am going to dominate you someday? Would you do that? Or are you braver than I am? This is what Joseph does. And his brothers are so jealous. They are at their wits' end, and they want to get rid of him. And then their dad sends him on an errand to take out some food to them when they're working. And he's coming, and they see him dressed in this cloak, this coat of many colors that their dad gifted him with. And they're so envious and so angry, they want to kill him. And then the oldest brother says, you know what, let's not do that. There are some people on the horizon going to Egypt. They're called Ishmaelites. Let's sell him as a slave to them, and then he'll be out of our hands, and we'll just tell the old man he was killed by a wild beast. Do you remember this story? Something about this vaguely? So this is what happens. Joseph, long story short, the Ishmaelites take Joseph. He goes to Egypt. He lives there. He's in jail. The idea of interpreting dreams, that gift keeps coming back. The Pharaoh has a very disturbing dream, the king of Egypt. And he hears that Joseph can interpret it. So he says, Joseph, come over here and tell me what it means. Joseph tells him, you're going to have 7 years of success and then 7 years of famine. You better plan. And it comes true. And as a reward, the Pharaoh says, you are going to be my second in command. You are now at the second highest seat in all of Egypt because you did this and you saved lives. Well, what's happening back on the home front? Joseph's brothers. Famine's hit them. They need grain. Where do they got to go? The only place that knew it was going to hit that stored up was Egypt. So where do they go? They go to Egypt. They don't recognize Joseph. Does Joseph recognize them? Yes, he does. Now, wouldn't you, youngest children, totally lord that over your older siblings and say, you want some grain? Yeah. Don't think so. Does he do that? No, because he's a much better person than I am. He ends up, long story short, they reconcile, okay? Now, why am I telling you all this story? Because this painting is very important. Guillerdet does this in 1900, and he wants us to make a connection. This is how Catholics should read the Bible. Old Testament is revealed in the New. New Testament is hidden in the Old. Does that make sense? Old Testament speaks to New Testament. Perfect example. The guy we're talking about, Joseph, in the New Testament, reflects the Joseph of the Old Testament. What's the gift of Old Testament Joseph? He can do what? Interpret dreams. How does God speak to New Testament Joseph? He dreams, exactly. Old Testament Joseph is sold into slavery. He goes to what country? Egypt. Joseph is told, get the heck out of Dodge because Herod wants to kill your kid. Go to Egypt. What are their dad's names? Jacob. They're both the protectors of their family. They're both the people who save their families. They both have to do with grain. The grain that saves the Old Testament. And what is Jesus? The bread of life. I mean, these connections are there, and there's no mistake. This is Holy Spirit stuff. I'm convinced of this. The person who writes the story of Old Testament Joseph has no clue that thousands of years later, this Jesus guy is going to be here, and Joseph's going to go through all this. Have no clue. It's Holy Spirit stuff. So when Guillerdet paints this painting, New Testament Joseph, he's wearing a multicolored coat. He wants us to make that connection to Old Testament Joseph. Does that make sense? To show God's providence. Can you see Joseph's face? No, you cannot. Why? Because he's a man of silence. He's a man of little word. What animal is she riding? A donkey, which is a symbol of peace and of Gentiles, right? Peace is right. You're exactly right. That was longer than 3 minutes. Are you okay with that? That was like 5 minutes of your life you're never going to get back. I got 10 minutes left? Groovy. Okay. Stained glass window of Joseph. One of the major symbols in art that's associated with Joseph is a lily. We just saw a bunch of those. You might still already have them in your church. Symbol of resurrection, of new life, but also a symbol of purity. Because he was pure, he was chaste. Okay? What's interesting is who's holding the lily in this stained glass window? Jesus. As if to say this is a grace that God gives to him. It's not of his own doing that he chooses this, but something God gives to him. Because of the interest of time, I just want you to think about this. What's the most difficult aspect of trusting someone? Just take about 30 seconds to think about this in your mind. What's the most difficult aspect of trusting someone, and what can you learn from Joseph's example of trusting in God? So take just 30 seconds to think about that. Either one of those or both those questions. Would you agree that trust is a big issue in our society these days? You know, the fake news, trust the science, follow the science, all that kind of stuff. We have these conversations. Ego has a lot to do with it, you know? Who do I want to trust? Who do I listen to? All right. He was a man of, what's the first one? Silence. Second one? Trust. And this one, he's a man of example. Okay, so he gives us the example of courage. He gives us the example of perseverance. And I think about this, what we celebrate today, Joseph the worker. Now, an icon, we have no idea if this is what he looks like. Icons are not meant to be historically accurate. They're highly symbolic, and they're one- or two-dimensional images. So we have no idea if Joseph looked like this, but it's interesting that of all the tools he could have painted with Joseph holding, he gave him a T-square. Why do you suppose that is? What does it represent, or what does it resemble? It represents the cross, or resembles the cross. That he's going to have a part to play in the salvation of our lives, of salvation history, by virtue of raising his son Jesus, who's going to die on a cross. Notice the lily. The green is a color of new life. Ordinary time is like that. Blue is the color of divinity, proximity to God. Clearly he was. That's why Mary, by the way, is always in blue, because of her proximity to the divine, her closeness to the divine. Absolutely favorite image of Joseph ever. 5 minutes. Favorite image of Joseph. I love this. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I love the intimacy of it. I love the fact that they are so close. If you can look at this, can you see what Jesus' fingers are doing? Yes. They're intertwined in Joseph's beard. Now, my wife and I are very fortunate because about 9 months ago, we became grandparents. For the first time. I know what you're thinking. You're all thinking, no way is he old enough to be a grandpa. Thank you. That's very kind of you. And you'd be right. Our son-in-law is one of those guys with the big old long, like lumberjack beard, okay? When he feeds their daughter, our granddaughter, look what she's doing. She does it all the time. Here she's asleep, but she's like clings to his beard. And there's something about that intimacy, that connection, that this painting just, they go back the wrong way. This painting just does. That we sometimes think of Joseph as this distant guy. He doesn't say anything, he's a statue somewhere. He was a real man. He was a real father. Oh, just wonderful. I love this image because the artist purposely made his hands to look like wood to represent his calling as a carpenter. You know, Georges de la Tour's very famous painting of Joseph instructing or showing example of what to do, how to work as a carpenter. But who's the guy providing the light? The light of the world, Christ. Yeah. So I want you to quietly think about this. Think about someone in your life who most closely reflects Joseph. Could be someone living or dead, but just take about 10 seconds and think of one person, an actual real person in your life who you think most closely exemplifies these traits. Just take 10 seconds to do that. Think of somebody. What I would challenge you to do is this. If the person is dead, say a prayer for them. Thank God for them in their presence in your life. If they're still alive, take the time to send them a message. Write a note, send them a text, call them, tell them. Imagine if you received that message, how it would change your day and how it would make you feel. Now imagine how it would make them feel. We don't do enough of this. I'm convinced of that. We don't do enough of this thanking, of this gratitude. But think about Joseph's humility and say, I can do this. I can write a note or I can send a text and say, you know what? Heard a presentation about Joseph today, got me to thinking of you, and I just want to thank you for the example you've given me. Boy, what a powerful thing that would be. So let's just pray this quietly. I'm just going to put up some 3 points real quick just to recap our day and then our morning, and then just ask you to prayerfully consider these. Lord, help me to recognize you in the silent moments of my day. Lord, help me to trust in you above all else. And Lord, help me to be the example that someone else needs. So I pray that St. Joseph is somebody who, if he hasn't been important in your life, that is important in your life, as somebody to look to for that example. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have questions, if we have time for that, but no, thank you. I appreciate it.